I'll just go through the last. I have it up here. Last two slides. You're looking at it already. Rumor, speculation, all this to be taken with a mountain of salt. You'll see in this there's things that directly contradict each other as well. So, like Lone Wolf, caught by chance when he had to submit a sample. Unconfirmed rumors, Kegan gave his name. So these first two just immediately contradict themselves. DNA found, rumor he checked himself in, to a mental hospital for 30 days. There's rumored, well, that's not a rumor. I can kind of, I'll leave it there for a while till I get a second source. Came forward early in the investigation to say he was at the trails that day. And speculation that his wife and family knew absolutely nothing about it, are in shock and are in hiding, which I think there's probably a good chance that's true. And I have one last thing to show you. Going back to that HLM one, that's really good. But I suppose they had 40 minutes there. But make sure you're, like, whatever podcast app you have, the Down the Hill podcast. If you've never heard of it, they have some really good stuff over the years. It was around at the start. They had really good episodes. Gray, who was talking about Robert's Ives there now earlier, there's a really good episode called, I think it could be Signatures, where they're talking about signatures at the crime scene. I think Robert is on that one. He's definitely on it somewhere anyway. And it's really interesting. But if you were subscribed to that podcast or have it on your RSS feed, like, all these new ones now will just automatically come through. So they're releasing them kind of on the same feed, and you'll see, I talked about before in past videos, I found it very interesting that this was the first year that they didn't have an episode released on the 5-year anniversary. Usually they're kind of all over it. And the fact that they had the Kegan Klein scoop and didn't release it was just making me, I just want to know what they know, basically. But this was a really good episode. I'm going to play just a few minutes here of the end where they're talking about the search, because they just kind of go into more details than they would on the news because they have more time here. So you should be able to hear this.
Or wherever you listen to podcasts.
We don't know how long he's been on the radar of police. We hear that it's been somewhat relatively recent, but there was a search not too long ago of his property.
There was a search on October 13th. It was a Thursday that started just before noon. And I spoke with several of Richard Allen's neighbors who say that they watched it. It's a very quiet neighborhood. They've never had anything happen in their neighborhood. So when they saw all these, what appeared to them to be unmarked police cars arriving and all of these men getting out of the car and going up to Richard's front door, they became suspicious. What's going on over there? What do we need to know? And they watched for the next 12 hours as police approached the door and asked him and his wife to exit their home. They kept them out of the home the entire day. They said that Richard stood outside his home for several hours.
You seen those photographs as well, didn't you? They were just waiting out by the car, and at some stage, like, Richard was standing outside of the car for a lot of it. Then he was in the car with his wife, but like 12 hours. And what was Richard and his wife talking about? I would love to hear that conversation. I'd listen to that whole 12 hours.
He sat in a vehicle with his wife for several hours. At some point, she left. They said there wasn't a lot going on. It was more people standing around for the first part of the day. And then as it was starting to get dark, they saw Chief Deputy Tony Liggett of the Carroll County Sheriff's Department arrive. And he's somebody that they know, so they recognized him immediately. They said he had a piece of paper in his hand, and he went up to Richard and showed him the piece of paper. And it was right after that, they said, a tow truck arrived immediately, started loading up his car. The officers who had been there accumulating all day entered the house. Some went into the backyard. They started searching around a shed, taking pictures, doing some digging. They used some sort of a device around the shed and in a flower bed that they thought was perhaps a metal detector, could be some sort of a sonar device or whatever to get a sense of what might be buried there. They did not dig up the flower bed, but they did dig up 2 spots near the shed. They also watched as police brought items out of the house, and the husband was watching with binoculars. He said that he saw one officer come out with what appeared to be 2 large bundles of dark colored cloth. He said, I couldn't tell you that it's clothing, but it definitely appeared to be cloth. There was a Macy's shopping bag, a shoebox, and a stack of books that he said, just looked like a reasonable stack of thin books, not like a huge stack of large encyclopedias or anything like that. They said that the 2 areas in the backyard that were dug up were rather small. One was incredibly small. They said that perhaps
like that to me, if an area is so small like that, does that not suggest that someone has put a pin on a map and said, right here, whether it's Richard or someone else, but like if they didn't know, if they just had a hunch something was in the back, they'd dig up the whole lot of it, wouldn't they? It wouldn't be so focused on a small area the size of a bottle cap.
all that could have come out of that spot was perhaps a bottle cap or something of that size. And they were curious, of course, wondering what is happening with our neighbor's house, our quiet neighbor. They said that he was somebody that they had lived next to for several years, that there was nothing special about him, was the way they phrased it to me, that he didn't have loud parties, he didn't have people over. They would see him going and coming from work, sitting out in his driveway, having a couple of beers after work and maybe smoking some cigarettes. They had a little more interaction with his wife, but they said they were just very quiet neighbors. And after watching that for 12 hours, this is a family that has children, and they called Tony Liggett and said, hey, we're a little concerned here about what happened, what this is all about. And all that Deputy Liggett would tell them at the time was to stay vigilant, especially with your wife and daughters.
That's a big heads up from the detective there. I'm shocked this didn't get out more at the time. Like, it didn't really for 2 weeks. But to say, just be vigilant with your wife and your daughters after you see something like this going down, like, whew.
Which unsettled them. And it wasn't until this past Friday, October 28th, when they saw a news report that there had been a development. They know some members of Abby and Libby's families. They called them and were able to, through conversation, make the connection that the family had been alerted to some information that sounded like it matched what they had seen with their neighbor, and put 2 and 2 together. And they said, starting with Wednesday, October 26th, they didn't see anybody in the house. That's apparently the day that he was first detained. And they're not sure where his wife is, but they haven't seen her at the property. But they said this was just a very normal, quiet family.
So one of the things I wanted to point out about what you're reporting is that I think throughout the entire work on this case that we've done, we've all envisioned when an arrest is made, kind of a full force, long arm of the law, U.S. Marshals, Sheriff's Office, ISP, choppers, kind of just the full force, right? This doesn't sound like it was that.
No, and they said nothing was marked. None of the officers were wearing uniforms
for the
that
arrest.
were marked. Well, for what they saw at the search warrant.
Okay.
Right.
Nobody
Yeah.
had any symbolism on their jackets or shirts identifying them. They did, because they have lived in the area a long time, they know many of the officers that are routinely working in the area. So there were some faces that they recognized as being law enforcement. The vehicles matched. There was a vehicle parked out front that appeared to them to be a crime scene truck of some sort. And they watched this activity all day. And they said, in our entire lives, we've never seen this kind of activity at a neighbor's house. So it definitely alarmed them.
So just to kind of get the timeline here, when was the search of the property?
The search was Thursday, October 13th, so about 2 weeks prior to this announcement.
2 weeks prior to the arrest, almost
Yes.
two. Yeah. So for 2 weeks, he was still there.
Yeah, they said they watched as he continued to live his life as normal. They know that the day after the search, he went.
Like, I wonder what he was doing. They're going to say there he went to work, but surely he knew for that 2 weeks that it's done. You know, surely he knew what they found and what was going to happen. I guarantee you also they knew exactly where he was at all times during that two weeks, but like, it seems like a long time, doesn't it? It could be longer, like, as far as I know, like some of the evidence that is there, like especially here, it's going to be fast tracked through labs and stuff like that. You wouldn't be waiting the normal 6 to 8 weeks. But still, for 2 weeks after the search, he's walking around, he's going to work. The neighbours are interacting with him, being like, "Hey, what happened the other day?" I'd probably ask him if I seen him out in the street. But like, what was that commotion? What was going on down there? What did you do?
Went to work. They saw him in the store, and they felt like he was continuing to just live his life as normal.
And so he was arrested on Wednesday, the 26th.
Correct.
And he was arraigned on Friday, the 28th, which is what Doug Carter is calling the day.
Today is the day, yeah.
I have the link in the description for this, and I'm updating it in real time. So if you have that link and have it saved, or go back to any video it's recently, it's underneath it. And anytime you click on it, any new information I have, or updates that I have, I'll go in and update it. I might get rid of some of these ones now, because I don't want it. It's like, I don't know, it's like 35 pages long. But some of this stuff was just kind of speculation at the time about the search, about it happening 2 weeks previously. And we kind of know that now to be true, so I can get rid of them, like these text messages. But the link is there anyway. I'll leave it there. Good luck. God bless everyone. Have a good day. Oh, and please give it a thumbs up there on the way out, will you?